Hello, everybody. This is Troy Rafferty, the People's Voice, on our podcast, and we are celebrating this month, Black History Month. And I am fortunate enough and unbelievably humbled to be in the presence of one of the iconic civil rights leaders of our time, and who's done so much for so many people and has sacrificed incredibly for the civil rights movement, and Reverend H.K. Matthews. And I just want to say, before we get started, Reverend, I am thrilled that you are here, and can't wait to talk to you about all of these issues that we face in today's society and that you faced over your entire lifetime. And so I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm humble and overjoyed that I've been asked to be a part of this podcast. So I'm the one that's honored.
Well,
Thank you so very much for asking me.
Well, we're going to talk about a lot of different things today on this particular show, but you and I had an interesting conversation earlier before we got started filming and recording. Tell me from your standpoint, from Reverend H.K. Matthews, somebody who lived through all of this, who sacrificed so much, who marched with Martin Luther King, who did all of these iconic things. What does Black History Month mean to you?
Well, in actuality, I'm a little taken aback by Black History Month or Black History because it kind of seems to me that the powers that be, and of course Black History Month came into being a while back, but it kind of seems to me that they're saying to us and to the population that they can talk about all of the accomplishments that black people have made to this country in 1 month. Nothing could be further from the truth, because black history is American history and American history is black history. My contention is that not disrespecting Black History Month, it does give us an opportunity, or give people an opportunity to learn something about black people. Because my contention is, I think the reason that so many people dislike black people is because they really don't understand us as a people, because they haven't had a chance to study about all of the contributions and all of the things that black people have done to make this country what it is. Because on our backs, this country was built. Mm-hmm. And I've had people to even ask me, they had the gall to ask me about black history, and when I tell them what I think, they tell me that if I don't like what's going on in America, especially with black people, that I should go back to Africa. And my response has always been that it's kind of hard for me to go back somewhere that I've never been, and that when the British go back to England, and the Jews go back to Israel, and the Germans go back to Germany, and the white people give this land back to the Indians who they took it from in the first place, I might consider going back to Africa. But for right now, America is my home. I was born 95 years ago in this country. So I think that's long enough to make me a citizen of America.
I think so.
I'm so appreciative of you asking me to be a part of this show and to express what I feel and not what some other people feel. Because I think, well, as I mentioned before we came in, a lot of people don't know that the traffic light was invented by a black man.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that the ironing board and the ironing comb and the pressing comb for hair and all of this stuff, Madam C.J. Walker and other people were instrumental, not necessarily instrumental, but did invent these items. So I think, again, and I'm being contradictory to my own self, that Black History Month does afford people an opportunity, at least momentarily, to find out some of the things that black people invented and that black people have gone through.
Mm-hmm.
Because, my history is one that people might not be interested in, but my history is one that's steeped in suffering and being misunderstood and mistreated. So a lot of people don't know what so many people went through in order that, and I mean black people, in order that they might enjoy the privileges that should have been ours all along, but that we had to fight for in order that they might be able to do what they do. I asked some kids the other day, I said, have you ever had the privilege of going into an establishment and seeing two water fountains, one that says colored, and one that says white? I can remember there was a store in this town, Pleasing, that was the name of the store, that we boycotted because they would not allow us to sit at the lunch counter, and they took us to court, had an injunction filed against us, took us to court, and I never drank so much water in all of my life because there were these two water fountains, colored and white. And I kept drinking water out of the white fountain until the bailiff said to me, Reverend Matthews, you know that you are supposed to drink water out of this fountain that says colored. And I said, well, I would if I wanted Kool-Aid. I said, but I don't want Kool-Aid. I want water, so I drink out the one that I know. But
and that wasn't that long ago. I mean,
no, that was not that long
ago. That's what I kind of want to emphasize too, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, because I do hear what you're saying, and quite frankly, it is in some ways disrespectful to just have Black History Month. Of course, it was Black History Week before it became Black History Month. Mm-hmm. We don't have White History Month.
Exactly.
I mean, we don't have there is no White History Month,
no.
And so I think your position is really intriguing. I guess one of the things, and I want to get to your history and your story, so that everybody can hear everything you did and how you've sacrificed and what has made you the person that you are today. But I'm curious, do you think we are progressing, or are we regressing in certain ways in terms of our race relations?
Now, it's kind of a mixed.
Maybe not a good question, but
I have mixed emotions about it, because first of all, there are people like you and people in this law firm and people like Rick, and I mean, there's so many white people who seem to kick the idea of black and white aside and deal with people based on themselves. I guess. On the back of my book, the back flap of my book, I said that I've learned that all white people are not bad and all black people are not good. And when we talk about folk being racist, that goes for both sides. They're racist in the black community, just like they are in the white community. And to automatically just say to yourself when you see a white person that he or she is racist, because you got to get to know that person. And once you get to know people, then you can categorize them. But until you do that, you need to withhold your evaluation or your judgment. Well, you don't supposed to judge anyway, but hold your evaluation of the person as to whether you feel that they are racist or not. Because, there's some black people I'd rather not be around. There's some white people I'd rather not be around. And it ain't because of their color, but it's because of their behavior. And so that's what I base my evaluation of people on, the way they treat me and the way they act.
And we're seeing some, it's I don't know if the right word is ironic, but it's very strange. We're facing a situation right now where our governor is passing policies such as not allowing Black history to be taught in AP courses. And it seems to me that we're, in some respects, taking one step forward, two steps back. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
My thoughts on that is that our governor is trying to take us back to a time that never should have been. And he is doing his best. And this is what I said at the outset. People don't understand, don't like us because they don't understand us. And he does not want Black history taught in the schools because he does not want the educational population to know who we are.
So, all right. So a couple points or questions about what you just said. So, getting back to my original question, does it seem like we are regressing in certain ways in our society in terms of race relations? Because I'm curious, as I said earlier, this wasn't that long ago. This was when, you were living, you were dealing with all of these things. You were, fighting and struggling for the equality. Where are we today in our society, in your opinion?
Good faith, who are of the white race and of other races, they want to see progress made. They are helping to see progress made. I think in one instance is right here. For you to do this is trying to help open the eyes of a lot of people who otherwise would not know. Mm-hmm. Because the sacrifices that were made by me and others were not pleasant, a lot of them.
Well, you sacrificed a lot, and I want to talk a little bit about you and your story and your sacrifices and what you lived through, what you saw. and how you fought for the movement. So, for all of our listeners out there, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I went through a lot. My family went through a lot. I endured 35 arrests for just little nitpicking stuff that law enforcement had determined that they were going to get me.
Mm-hmm.
And
And they did get you.
and they did get me
They did get
in the
you.
final analysis. In the 37th arrest, they did get me.
For peaceful protesting.
Peaceful protesting.
For peaceful protesting.
Exactly. And I can remember even the sit-ins, right downtown Pensacola, when we had the young people sitting in at the lunch counters, and we as the adults were outside picketing, and the policemen would take flashlight batteries off of the stand, stick them in the kids' pockets, and then arrest them for shoplifting. That's the kind of stuff we endured. I endured the Klan shooting in my house. And the thing that added insult to injury about that is that the niece of the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan here, T.T. Wentworth, his niece came to town to, just make it clear and do some things. And she never mentioned the fact that I was the target of the Ku Klux Klan. And that's no fun. When you got to sleep with one eye open and one eye closed, that's no fun. When the Klan is kicked in your back door, that's no fun. There's a young man in this town by the name of Michael Jackson who I will never, never forget, who sat up all night with a shotgun across his lap in order to protect me and my family, where we could get some semblance of rest at night. Plus the fact that I might be going too fast, but
No, you're fine.
we went. I was a janitor over at the building on Jordan and A Street that was called a physician's lab, and I was a janitor over there. And the word came out from Dr. King that we were going to have a march that weekend from Selma to Montgomery in order to demand voting rights that we should have had all the time, rights that were our God-given rights.
God-given rights.
And I dropped my little mop bucket and got in my little 1957 pink and white Ford Fairlane and made my way to Selma that Saturday for a mass meeting that night, that Saturday night. And that Sunday, when we attempted to march across the bridge, when we got about midway, we were met by state troopers with billy whip clubs and tear gas and dogs. And they ran over us with those horses and dogs. And John Lewis, who was a friend of mine, was beaten worse than anybody. and I was in the middle, and thank God, all I got were a few bruises on my knee. But there were people like John Lewis and Amelia Boynton, who was in the back, but they beat her down like a dog. So that was an experience I would care not to repeat.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt that it was worth it. But now, after all of that sacrifice that was made by blacks and whites, because we had white people in that march, we had white people who got killed trying to assist us. They already had the right to vote, but they were trying to help us. And I never will forget, there was Reverend James Reeb, who was a Lutheran minister and got beat to death outside of a cafe in Selma. There was Viola Luzzo, who got shot because she was carrying riders back and forth, because we had a little place in Hayneville that was called Tent City. And that was about midway, and we set tents up where people were, and she was taking people back and forth to that and got shot and killed. And she wasn't black. As I said, she was white.
See, and that's one of the big things. So when we talk about Black History Month, if we don't continue talking, if people don't hear your story, your struggles, what happened, then we are likely to repeat history.
It's lost.
It's
and
lost.
We're bound to repeat it.
And we're bound to repeat it. And that's why I think, it shouldn't be Black History Month. I agree with that. Totally. I mean, this should be part of American history. This is what American history is. And listen, a lot of white people don't want to talk about it because it's an ugly part of our history.
Yeah.
I mean, the way the discrimination, the violence, the Klan, everything. It's an ugly portion of our history. And so a lot of white people don't want to talk about it. But if we don't talk about it, and this is one of the things that upsets me so much about our governor making the decision not to allow Black history to be taught. It makes it so that we are going to repeat it. And we are going to go back. And that's why I said at the outset, I feel like we move one step forward, two steps back in many regards.
Exactly.
I agree with what you said. There is some progress being made in some respects, but there's a lot of regression being, exercised right now. And so, we need to continue talking about what our history is.
Exactly. And we need to, here again, I'm being repetitive, but we need to stop passing judgment on people, it's black and white, but based on the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
It irritates me for people to just kind of assume and sometimes speak that white people, all white people, are racist.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I said that we got some black racists who are just as bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, but my experience was right here in this city was not the most pleasant experience that one could undergo.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about, like I said earlier,
you were arrested and condemned for peaceful protesting.
Exactly.
Abused.
I was arrested. They say for singing a chant, and this is what I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
They said that we sang a chant that said 2468, who shall we assassinate? Well, first of all, I didn't lead the chant. Secondly, it was proven that the chant was 2468, who shall we incarcerate? Thirdly, the gentleman, a young preacher who was with us, took the stand in court and testified that he was the person who led the chant. Didn't matter. Kirk Beale was determined that I was going to be gotten out of circulation. And when you are the target of law enforcement, you're not in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
And they arrested me, and when we went to trial and it was proven again that the chant was 2468, who shall we incarcerate, and not who shall we assassinate, plain as day on a shotgun recording, I was still sentenced
And went to
to
jail.
5 years in the state penitentiary. And a former member of this law firm, who was a dear friend of mine, Reverend H.K,
Great governor.
is the best governor Florida has ever had, as far as I'm concerned.
And in some respects, I think he's been listed as one of the best governors in the history of the country.
That's right. He was a good man.
He co-founded the firm with David Levin. David Levin Askew. Yeah. Anyway, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
So I spent 30 days in the state penitentiary. I got out on appeal bond to the Ninth Circuit or 11th Circuit of Appeals. And they upheld my conviction. So they sent me back to the state penitentiary. I got out again after 33 days. The first time I spent 30 days. Second time I spent 33 days. I got out again on appeal bond. Now, but people have said to me, you mean to tell me you only stayed in prison 63 days? I said, staying in prison 63 minutes for something you didn't do is not good. I say, but thank God the inmates had all heard about my struggle, and they formed a protective wedge around me where they didn't let anybody get to me. But now, prior to my arrival at the state penitentiary, I had been out on appeal bond. I'm backing up. But anyway, I was out on appeal bond pending sentencing. Kirk Beale, again, was the judge. And I made the announcement that we were gearing up for the biggest demonstration that Pensacola had ever seen, and that was wrong. And because when I was on my way out the door of my house that night, 2 deputies met me at my door and said that my bond had been revoked, and they were ordered to bring me back to the county jail. One of them was stupid enough to say to a black inmate that he wished I had run so he could have shot me. He was one of the ones who escorted me early the next morning, to the state after I had been pronounced guilty. It was a couple of mornings later. Escorted me to the state penitentiary along with another deputy, and there was a young white fellow who was handcuffed to me, and we were both sitting in the back seat. And you know where Chattahoochee is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's the town Chattahoochee, and then the mental institution.
Mental institution, yep.
They got to the town of Chattahoochee, and they stopped at all night, one of them backwoods good old boys cafe, and got out, opened the back door of the cruiser with me and this young white fellow back there, and went inside. And the young white fellow said to me, "Come on, H.K., let's run." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "If you go, you gonna catch hell trying to carry me." I said, "Because I'm not going." They came out after they finished. I guess they were a little surprised to see both of us still sitting there. We got to the state penitentiary at Lake Butler, and when they got ready to come back, this young white fellow was coming back with them. And he told me, he said, "H.K., I want you to know, I'm not an inmate at all. But they had me handcuffed to you to entice you to run, to say, so that they could shoot you and say you were trying to escape."
Trying to escape.
But getting back to what I was saying about how the inmates formed a protective wedge around me because they had heard about my struggles, and they didn't let anybody get close to me. Nobody, including the correctional officer, because during that time, they just picked people up off the street and put a gun on them and a billy whip club, and they were ignorant as they could be. So, and they didn't mind whipping you, you know, beating inmates.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we see that today, in today's day and age. It's amazing. You can't turn the TV on without some type of police violence.
Yeah.
And it very disproportionately is against black people.
Black people.
No question.
That's right.
So you know, I guess I'm curious about your thoughts as to what you see happening. I mean, it is rampant. I mean, every time you turn on the TV, every time I turn on CNN or I turn on ABC News or anything else, there is a discussion about yet another, you know, and we've seen it. I mean, obviously, we're all familiar with all the stories and all of the news and all the videos showing abuse of young black men by police. And it doesn't sound like things have changed all that much.
No, and it's the I don't know if they do background checks, psychological checks on these policemen, because the mindset of so many of them, and all this does not apply to all policemen. They've got
there's a lot of really good
They've
police.
got some good folk out there on the street.
There are, and they face dangers, and I totally agree with you.
And it galls me for people to just categorize every policeman as being, what do you call it? I don't know what you call it, violent or something, because they're all not like that.
Mm-hmm. No, there's a lot of really good police officers who do the right things.
Yeah.
And the gun violence is, you know, right now, you know, and with, once again, getting back to our governor who wants there to be this, you know, ability to carry a gun.
Wild, Wild West.
The Wild, Wild West.
Wild, Wild West.
And that is, once again, 2 steps back.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is. But, you know.
And people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they're dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on this last killing in Memphis, I have had some people say to me, well, Matthews, I don't understand. Black people always taken to the streets and rioting and carrying on. When a white policeman killed a black, where are they now? I said, well, first of all, these 5 black policemen, I said, yeah, they were immediately discharged from their position and charged with the murder. I said, a reason that black people are not cutting up and doing like they did is because when a white policeman or a white policeman in a group kill a black person, they are suspended with pay. They're given a vacation.
Pending the investigation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pending an investigation. And sometimes the investigation does not take place because they think that the public forgets. And sometimes when it takes place, it's a mockery. So this is the reason that folk raise so much Cain when a white policeman or white policemen kill a black person.
So you and I were, I was blessed to be involved at the Martin Luther King Living the Dream banquet just a few weeks ago that you were at and honored at. And and I am very honored to have gotten the H.K. Matthews Award, which sits proudly on my mantle, and I'm very proud of that. Talk about in terms of Black History Month, just to try to keep the struggle alive, because we still have to talk about things. We still have to struggle. Talk about Martin Luther King and his impact.
Martin King was an ordinary man who did extraordinary things. People have asked me, what kind of man was Dr. King? And I said, well, he was just a regular person. But he was a knowledgeable person. And he was a person who had every fiber of his being was equality for his fellow man. They celebrate Martin Luther King Day because he was a man who spoke up not just for black people, but for everybody. And he was not selective in who he was trying to help as it relates to status. Because if you recall, the city that he got killed in, where those 5 policemen killed this person, but the city that Martin King got killed in, he was in that city to support not some highfalutin folk, but garbage men. He didn't care if you were white or black. If you were in need of some kind of relief as it relates to your being, he was willing to put it all on the line to help you. And this was his legacy. You know, he was like Fred Levin. He was like Reuben Askew. He was like so many people who I know who would throw everything aside to help those they didn't even know. So, to me, that was Dr. King's legacy.
Well, and it's interesting you say, because it was really about equality, not trying to denigrate somebody else like you said, whether they're white, black, Asian, anything. The reality is what it's about is equality, and that's what we have to. That's why we have to keep talking and educating people about equality.
Exactly, and we need to realize that you don't be pulling other folk down because you're trying to get somewhere, because you don't build your house by tearing the shingles off somebody else's house. We are fighting for. I am, at my age, I'm still against inequality, and I'm still pushing wherever I can for equality and rights for all of God's children. That's my position, and I don't think I'll lose that.
No, and one of the things one of the Dozier School, the Dozier Boys Reform School over in Mariana. We've been Mike Papantonio and I have been fighting and trying to pass some legislation to try to bring some semblance of justice to the Dozier Boys, but it's getting back to what I guess one of my original points was. It's amazing to me when we look at our history, and I walked through the Dozier the school campus. Now it's obviously been abandoned, closed in 2011. But I went through there with some of the victims and heard their stories about how they were treated. And one of the dramatic things was there was a black campus and there was a white campus. And the blacks were not allowed to talk to the white, call them students, inmates. And one of them, in fact, got yanked out of bed in the middle of the night and taken to the White House, which is what they called where they had they had their beating rooms, and was beaten to within an inch of his life because he talked, because he spoke. Because it was a black boy and a black kid and a white kid, and because they spoke, they got beaten within an inch of their lives. And I guess my point is, it's amazing to me that I'm walking around the school and you can feel the evil. You can feel it. It's palpable. But it's amazing to me that this was not that long ago.
Yeah.
It was not that long ago.
Not that long ago. You're absolutely right. And I didn't have that experience, but I was taken on a tour of, I can't think of the name of the school, where the Little Rock Nine in a part of integrating.
Yeah.
They took us on a tour of that school. I took several pictures with the statues outside, but we went inside, we went around the school, and to think about what even they didn't suffer like the Dozier Boys did, but think about even what they had to go through. And to think about the bravery of those young people.
Children.
That's right.
They were children, and
Bravery.
they showed more bravery. I'd like to think I'd have that kind of bravery. I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would.
I tell people right now, if I had known what I was going to encounter on that Edmund Pettus Bridge, I'm not so sure I'd have gone. But I guess something within that pushed me to go. And we were jubilant. We knew we were going to be stopped. We knew that. But never did we think the evilness that we encountered, we would encounter.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Reverend. I want to thank you not just for being here and sharing your story and talking and educating people about American history. So we're going to call this American History Month for the rest of the month.
Exactly.
But thank you for your sacrifices.
Thank you.
We all owe you a debt of gratitude for what you put yourself through, put your family sacrificed, you sacrificed, everybody, and so you demonstrated a level of bravery that is unmatched, and I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing the stories, and I hope I can get you back on here because we got to keep talking. We got to keep talking. We got to keep talking, or else we have to. We still have work to do in terms of race relations in this country, and we need to keep talking about it.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thanks for having me.